Hi everyone, my name is Marianne. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, please click on subscribe and turn on your notification bell so that you get notified for future videos. Today, it's going to be story time, and I would like to talk about emigrating to Canada from the Philippines back in, a long time ago, back in '88. And I'd like to talk about the differences between the lifestyle, my childhood, and when I moved to Canada and what that was like. So hopefully you like it. So I grew up in, I would say, a middle class family, a middle class background in the Philippines. I left when I was 12. So I went to an American school in the Philippines. So English was actually my first language, and it was the main language that I spoke at home, even with my parents, and eventually my brother, who was born 8 years after me. Um, so my mom was in the military, and my dad was the vice president of major company in the Philippines. And so we had three housekeepers, and one of which was kind of my nanny, I guess. And we had a driver who was responsible for driving my mom to work. And sometimes he would drive me to school. When I got older, I actually started going to school by myself just because I wanted to. My school was an hour away from where we lived. We actually lived in the province of Cavite, and my school was in Las Piñas, which was in Manila. So you actually had to take two buses to get there. And I wanted to do that on my own. So I think when I was in grade grades 4, 5, and 6, I think I started going to school by myself. But so lifestyle wise, obviously, I guess it was kind of a little bit privileged. We did, like I said, we did have housekeepers. So somebody was cooking for us, somebody was cleaning, somebody was taking care of me because my brother wasn't born yet. So, we had a great house. We had a sizable house, and so we had people who were doing the landscaping and all that stuff. So all our needs were definitely taken care of. So as far as nanny goes, she would make sure that I took showers or baths every day, or that she would watch me if I wanted to go play outside. I wasn't really allowed to play outside in the middle of the day because it was too hot. So most afternoons, like most early afternoons, I would spend reading in my room. So a lot of time was actually spent by myself, and that's kind of how I preferred it. And I guess from the beginning, I was already an introvert. I was okay playing with others, but I definitely liked my time alone better than spending them with other kids. I remember being able to go with my mom to work at the Navy. She was in the Navy. She was a military nurse, but she was, I believe, a major when I was young, and then she got promoted to lieutenant colonel, and she retired as a colonel. So her office was in the hospital, and I, being a young girl, was able to go in there and just roam around the hospital by myself, and I knew everybody by name, and I would just say hello to people and say hello to patients, and I was just able to go around everywhere, and it was great. There were times when something would happen and it would become a red alert, so my mom would have to stay at the quarters in at the hospital or at the base, I guess, and she would take me, and I would spend the night there, and I knew all the military nurses there as well. So I do have memories of doing that, and it was great memories of being able to go into that hospital and just knowing everybody. I did go to my dad's work as well a couple of times. He worked in Manila, in Metro Manila, so city center, and it was a tall building. And I think I've only gone there once or twice or something. It was a pretty big company, so I guess I wasn't really allowed to go there most of the time. But he did have his own office and blah blah blah. So sometimes we would have like lunch dates or something where he would take me to work, and then we would have a lunch date at some fancy restaurant, some fancy hotel, and then we would go home. So my dad had his own car, he drove to work, whereas my mom had a driver take her. So I guess my parents, so my dad's parents had emigrated to Canada, and so did all of his sisters. He has three sisters, and they've all emigrated to Canada. And then my mom's sister also emigrated, but they moved to the US in 87. So at that time, we were pretty much the only ones left in the Philippines. So my mom and my dad decided to apply for residency in Canada. They decided to go to Canada instead. So in 88 we moved, and also I do remember that moving to Canada, we flew, and that was the first time I've flown on a plane. We landed in Regina, I believe, in the middle of the night, and this was in May. We moved in May, so it was spring, but it was still cold. We were heading towards Winnipeg, where one of my dad's sisters live and his parents lived. So we were moving to Winnipeg, and so we landed in Saskatchewan as a layover, and we thought that it was already Winnipeg. So we actually got off the plane, and I'm glad that we were able to get back on the plane, the same plane, to land in Winnipeg. And I'm pretty sure we landed in the middle of the night in Winnipeg. And I remember it being cold. I remember going to the grocery store with my aunt and being able to like taste the fruits. And I don't really know if people can do that now. I don't know, but so we were able to like taste grapes, for instance, or taste berries, and before you bought them. And also at that time they had, so this was Superstore that I'm talking about, and at that time they also had the people who were helping you, they were on roller skates, or I guess rollerblades, I guess by that time. And so they would go around, and if you needed something, the cashier would page them, and then they would go, and then they would take them for you, and then they would give it to you. And yeah, so it was pretty cool. So I started going to school that year. I started going to junior high, so I started my 7th grade at junior high in Winnipeg. And I remember the first time it snowed, my mom totally bundled me up. And, a sweater on, a winter coat on, long johns on. Long johns are like thermal underwear. And I had my big boots on, and I had my gloves on, and I had my hat on, and my scarf on. And it was actually only -1, but it snowed. But we didn't know that it wasn't like -1 degrees Celsius. So that would be what, like 35 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe? We didn't know that was actually not that cold. So So I started my first day of winter like that. It definitely wasn't like the school that I went to in the Philippines. It was a lot less structured, it was a lot less disciplined. So that was pretty weird for me. And then their grades, their grading scale was also different from the Philippines, from the school I went to anyway. Whereas, an 80% was an A and failing was 50, whereas in the Philippines, the failing grade was 75 or something like that. So it was definitely different. But, I obviously had to go through it, and I started getting used to it. So I was at that junior high for grade 7 and grade 8. And then, so grade 9, so the whole time I've been in school, probably my whole life really, I I've been so independent that my parents had actually fortunately given me the independence to be able to make my own choices, and that included my education. So when I was in grade 8, I had heard about this program at the high school called International Baccalaureate, and at that time, it was a fairly new program. So what International Baccalaureate is, I believe it started in Switzerland, and so it's I guess similar to advanced placement, but it was more rigorous, it was more advanced, and it wasn't just like taking, if you're in advanced placement, what you normally would do is just take advanced placement classes, which are college level, and then you take the exams and then you get college credit for them. For International Baccalaureate, you actually had to apply to the program. Your parents are interviewed, and so are you. So, what I actually did was so I only went to high school in Winnipeg for grades 9 and 10. So, I was in the IB program for grades 9 and 10. So, I wasn't actually able to finish the program because in grade 11, we moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, where my mom had a job at the university hospital as a nurse. I did go to high school there, and my brother went to, I guess, junior high there. And that was where I took some more IB classes and a lot more AP classes, but I actually dropped out of the IB program and just took AP classes for the most part. So going back to moving to Canada. So obviously the big difference is that I no longer had maids, I no longer had a nanny, we no longer had a driver, we no longer had someone who would cook meals for us or do our laundry. So definitely it was different. And I think what made it the hardest or the biggest adjustment that I had to make was that my parents both had double and triple jobs. I mean, most immigrants to Canada or the US would probably know about this, would probably know what I mean. That most immigrants would have to hold 2 or 3 jobs just to survive at first. My mom had to work hard to get her nursing certification, and she had to take exams, and she had to take an English exam and all that stuff, and that took a long time. So obviously, she had to find other jobs to support us, and so did my dad. So with them having to work 2 or 3 jobs, I had to basically take over the household at 13 years old. And I obviously had to just kind of learn as we went along. And I had to cook for the family. I was kind of the mom for my brother. So I had to go to his parent-teacher conferences, and if he had, performances at school and stuff like that, I went to all of them. And so yeah, I had to do all of that, and I had to do the laundry and clean the house and all that stuff. So it was definitely a big adjustment for me because I never had to do that back in the Philippines. So at the same time, I kind of thought that, you know, I know that a lot of people don't like having to make that adjustment. And I understand, I fully understand. However, I also kind of have the feeling of um, achievement and being able to do things on your own without having to rely on someone else. And I think that living in North America, um, that's kind of the goal. That's kind of the yeah, that's kind of the goal I think that people have for themselves is achievement and being able to achieve your own goals and fulfill your own dreams. And I think that in the Philippines, if you grow up there, you're kind of taken care of by your parents, by your grandparents, sometimes by your family, by your housekeepers and all that stuff. So you're never able to really do things on your own and be able to achieve anything on your own. So I think that that was one of the things that I liked about moving to Canada and then to the US because I was doing things on my own from a very young age. And yes, it was hard, obviously, but you just kind of did it. And then so we moved to Utah when I was in 11th grade. I did my 11th and my senior year. I picked my own classes. I picked my own school, actually, because I had heard that the school was very good and they had a high percentage of students who went on to Ivy League schools and they had great classes. And so I picked that school. And I pretty much was on my own. So I graduated from high school in Salt Lake City, and I started college at the University of Utah. But again, I was on my own, and my brother, who was very young when we moved to Canada, that's the only kind of lifestyle that he has known, that he has gotten used to, and so he kind of grew up being independent and doing stuff on his own and also making his own choices. So he didn't have to make the same adjustment as I did. And so that is basically the story. And I know a lot of people who are planning to still move to North America from different countries all over the world, and so that's why I wanted to do this video on what my experience was like. And of course, you have to understand that this is my experience. It's probably not going to be your experience or anyone else's experience. There might be similarities, of course, but this was my personal experience. But at the same time, I believe that people can probably relate, or they can learn something from my story, and that's why I decided to do this video. So if you've gotten any value from this video at all, please like or share or subscribe because it really helps a lot. And yeah, so that's the end of the story. I mean, if you want to share your story with me, and I would love to hear people's stories or people's experiences, or if you have any unique experiences, please feel free to comment down below. So that's it, and that's my story. I now live in Calgary. I actually don't have family here, so again, there's that, being on my own. So this is where I work, and this is where my friends are, and I've lived here for 21 years now, so it has been a long time. So I actually pretty much consider Calgary my home because I have lived here the longest. I've done most of my growing up here. I've had most of my experiences here. So, being in Calgary, I've met a lot of, especially Filipino people who have just moved to Canada, who have just moved here. And, they've shared their experiences with me and the difficulties that they've had. So, yeah, I think it's valuable that people share what their experience was like in emigrating to another country. Like, you're leaving your own country, chances are that it's a completely different culture that you have to get used to. A lot of you, I was lucky enough that English was my first language, and so that wasn't a problem for me. But a lot of you had to learn English to come here or are still learning English. And yeah, so I would totally love to hear from people who are just planning to move to North America, or who have moved here, or wherever in the process you might be. Let me know what it's like, and I would just love to hear from you. Anyways, so that's the end of it. Again, please feel free to like, share if you have friends who are going through the same thing, and subscribe, of course, to my channel. And I hope to see you next time. And ciao.